Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duke Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. Today we have Juan Vargas on the show. We met him at Rockcliffe's boot camp in LA earlier this year. With me is my co-host, Vince Gethings.
Hey, Duke, super excited to catch up with people that we've met before. This is the power of networking. We're at a networking event in LA. Fast forward 5 months later, they're on our show. We're reconnecting, telling stories, talking shop. It's awesome to watch this stuff happen. It just goes to show you how important it is to get out there. Even if you're an introvert, you feel like you can't be a people person. This is a people industry, a team sport. You need to get out there, and this is just showing the fruits of that labor of going to events like this. And Juan is an awesome guy. He's going to talk us through some awesome tips on taking action, some income generators that he uses in his deals, tips on finding off-market deals. It's going to be an awesome show.
Today, we have a special guest, Juan Vargas. Juan is the founder of GenWealth Capital Group, where he oversees over 700 units and is an equity partner in over 1,500 units. Juan has been actively engaged in all aspects of real estate sales, investment, management, financing, and construction for more than 10 years. He has experience with residential as well as commercial, including individually owning and managing a 32-unit multifamily property, giving him valuable multifamily experience. Juan, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be on the show, guys. It's appreciate the invitation, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we met you at Rockcliffe's event in LA. For those who aren't familiar, tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you're working on now.
Yeah, for sure. We did meet there. When was it? I guess earlier in 2020, January, February. I can't remember when that event was exactly, but yeah, a little bit about me. I am based in Houston, Texas. Born and raised in Texas. And so growing up, my dad was also in real estate. He still is in real estate on the single family side. He has a couple of commercial properties as well. And so, growing up, I decided to go to a technical school. I went to go work for BMW. During that process, it was long hours. And I was kind of, getting tired of, working the long hours. And so I started researching ways to get into real estate, ways to create passive income. And that was through rental houses, right? And I kind of put that together with what my dad was already doing. And I was like, you know what, let me try it as well, right? Except for whenever I was growing up, my dad, even though he was investing in real estate, he kind of was like a one-man show, right? And so he was the guy that was also underneath the sink, fixing this, fixing that. And, I was like, it doesn't really sound good to me, right? So I didn't really think about it or look at it too much as I was growing up, right? But, when I was at BMW, I realized that, hey, my dad was right, but I don't think he was doing it the right way, right? So I think he needed a little bit more skill, and he needed to leverage, right? And by leverage, I mean like other people and also, leverage, using banks, using loans, those type of things. And so yeah, long story short, I ended up, starting in real estate through single family. And I had a couple of single family homes, and, one of my tenants ended up leaving. I know, Vincent, you're in the military. One of my tenants, that one tenant was also a military. He was in the military, and he had to move because he was going to get stationed somewhere else, right? And he was an awesome tenant. So I didn't have any issues while he was there. But then once he left, for whatever reason, I had issues, getting it released, right? And it was only like, I would say a month and a half, right? But I was doing everything I could to market the property, and for whatever reason, it wasn't getting leased, And then so what I found out was during that process. During that month and a half period, I was the one that had to pay for the mortgage. I was the one that had to pay for the utilities, all those expenses. And so whatever profits I thought I had made, it was going back into this just to keep it alive, right? So I was like, man, this sucks, right? Because I had one unit that was occupied. It was good, but now that it's vacant, I'm like 0% occupied, 100% vacant. Yeah. And so I kind of thought about it. I was like, if I had like a 10 or 20 or 30 unit, and I was one guy down, then, it's still 99 point whatever occupied, and I'm still, moving along and not having to come out of pocket to pay for things. So that's when the idea and the aha moment kind of triggered in my head and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe single family is not the right path for me, right? Maybe I should look into larger properties and to get that skill. And that's when, the idea of multifamily was kind of, brought into my mind.
How long did that take going from single family to that aha moment of like, I'm 100% vacant. Actually, you weren't 100% vacant. You were 100% occupied. Your tenant was just named Juan Vargas. And you became your own tenant. A lot of people don't realize that. But how long did that take? Like, what was that gap?
Yeah, that's funny. I was a tenant for a month and a half. And so, I would say from the time, well, I realized it right away, right? Once I was vacant, I had to pay for things. It's like, you know what? It kind of triggered in my mind. And so I would say, it took me like a month and a half to figure that out. But I was in single family for, a couple of years before I jumped into multifamily, right? And I will tell you that it was like the best decision that I ever made, was just kind of leaving the single family to the side and not focusing on that. And yes, I know a lot of guys that are successful in the single family space and it works for them. And that's great, right? My original idea was to, retire and also, become financially free. But that was going to take me, 60, 70, 80 houses. And by the time I get to that point, I'm going to be, 60, 70, 80 years old as well, right? And so I was like, you know what, this is not going to work for me because it's going to take too long, right? So it was a lot of different reasons why, it just made all the sense in the world for me, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So the last follow-up for that is for me as well. Like I started in the single family and then small multifamily, the duplex and fourplexes. Then I was trying to do the math of how many doors till I reach, the financial freedom. I can, fire my boss, all this stuff. And I was like, man, this is like a lot of time. And then the circles I was around, then they were doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. And they were still like getting like that accumulated, but they still haven't retired yet. They were still accumulating their small multifamilies and their single families. And that's when for me, that was one of my aha moments. I was like, wait a second, like they're me 10 years from now, and they're still trying to get to that number. Like they're not scaling fast enough.
Exactly. And so you have to kind of think about it. Like, what's the best approach to take here? Right. And there's a lot of guys that are listening to the show right now that have rental houses. Right. And which is good. I'm not saying that it's not good, but, also understand what your goals are, right? If your goal is to just, make, 3, 4, 5 grand on rental houses, rental income, then that's fine. You're doing great. Right. But, if you want to get to a larger scale, larger number, then maybe it's going to take a lot longer, and you need to look at other ways that you can get there, quicker. And exactly, it's through scale, right? And that's through multifamily.
So how did you get started in multifamily? What was the first deal that you did?
Yeah. So once I realized that, I told my wife, you know what, I'm going to buy, apartments. And then she's like, okay, because, that moment in time, I think it was more psychological, right? It was more mental, like, hey, how can we afford like $1 million plus buildings, right? But, so it took a little bit to get through that. But yeah, I started to do direct mail, right? So what I started doing was looking for properties through the county assessor's website, right? In a certain zip code, right? Zip codes that were around me, because I don't really want to go over 30 to 40 miles or minutes, rather, away from me, right? So I try to keep it within a confined space and a confined area. And so I look for zip codes that were around me. And then I look for properties in the county assessor's websites that were also within a certain size, right? So for example, I was looking for anything not really bigger than like 60 units. So like 50 units, 40 units, 30 units in that size, right? So it was the size, it was the location, geographical area, I guess you could say, and it was the length of ownership that I was looking for. So I was looking for properties where the owners had owned them for 3 years or more. And why? That was just something that I internally put together, because I figured that, hey, if they've owned it for 3 years or longer, then that means that they've already kind of gone through the majority of their business plan. And so they may be ready for a sale. And a lot of those deals, even back just 4 or 5 years ago, were on like 5-year notes, right? Or 7-year notes, right? So it means that they had to either refi or sell, once that time came, the 5th year or 7th year. Now we're able to get, a lot of 10-year, 12-year debt, right? even longer than that, 15-year debt, right? I have a deal that's 15-year debt. But so I was looking for deals that were 3 years or longer in ownership, and then just sending mail to them, right? And these were direct mail. These were handwritten letters to them, and just asking them if they were interested in selling, right? And sure enough, came across several owners that were looking to sell. Most of them didn't make sense until I came across one that was a 32 unit, and that was my first one. And they were mom and pop owner and ready to sell, ready for retirement, and build a rapport and made it happen.
So how did you structure that deal? Was that a syndication or a JV?
This was before I learned anything about, or I knew anything about syndication. I educated myself, enough in the multifamily space, and then I pulled the trigger, right? And so I didn't know anything about syndication at that time, and so this was actually a partnership, right? So at that time, I didn't have all the funds to be able to pay for the apartment, to be able to buy the apartment, like the down payment, closing costs, those type of things. I had a majority, but not all of it. So I actually had one of my, he's a good friend of mine, and he's actually invested in several of my deals, since then. But he was a GC, general contractor, and he still is on the single family side, right? And so I talked to him about that, and then I even invited him to the house and say, "Hey, man, give me a quote for rehabbing the house that I can, put this thing on the market." And he's like, "Why?" I was like, "Because I need a seller to pull out some equity that's here and be able to take down this apartment that I'm interested in buying." He's like, "Wait, tell me more about that." And then I told him more about that. He was like, "You don't have to sell, man. I'll put in whatever you need, and then maybe we could partner up on it." And I was like, "Okay, well let's talk about it." And that's what I ended up doing. We ended up partnering up because he was a GC. He also did a lot of the work on the property, physical improvements, and we made it work, right? And then, as I mentioned, that was a good success, and he's invested with me several times as a limited partner in many of my deals afterwards.
Got it. And what about the last deal that you did as a GP? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so the last deal was a deal here in Houston. This was a 264 unit deal, and that was $23 million acquisition. I guess it was like $8.5 million raise, and so we went from that little deal that was just $1 million to a $20+ million deal, right? So things can happen, but this is all through partnerships, right? I couldn't have done this alone, right? You can't. In order for you to scale in this business, it's a team, right? You guys know there's 4 partners in your on your team, right? You guys are doing well, right? You guys just closed a couple of deals, so it definitely takes teamwork to be able to get to keep growing and to keep scaling.
Got it. And so for that last deal, when did you close it, and what challenges did you overcome?
Yeah, so we closed this one in February of 2020, right? So there were a couple of challenges with the deal, and so one of them specifically was we did this is our first 506C offering because all the other ones were 506B. So we did a C. We wanted to try it out because it was a larger raise, and for us, we felt that it was a better idea to go with the C because we're only able to bring in 35 sophisticated / non-accredited investors into a 506C offering. And so because it was a larger raise, we felt that, hey, if we were able to market the deal, and if we're able to, meet somebody at a conference, they wanted to invest in a deal, then it's totally legal. It's totally fine to do that, right? You're able to protect yourself, right? And so we pulled the trigger on doing a 506C. What we found out was that it's even though you can market a deal, the majority of the people out there still want to know who you are, right? So I can blast my deal like on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and all these different social media sites, and put on YouTube or whatever, right? But the majority of the people there still want to know who Duke is, who Vincent is. They want to know if they've met you before, if they've invested with you before, those type of things, right? So it wasn't as easy as we had hoped for, and it wasn't as easy as we had thought it would be. So it was a struggle. I wouldn't say it was a struggle, but it was a little bit more of a struggle than we had planned for, right? But nonetheless, we were able to get it done as a team, and so which was good. But there was some learning experiences there, right? With doing a 506C. So I would say that was the biggest challenge. We did lose a couple of investors because there's a accreditation process that you have to go through when doing a 506C. You have to go through a verification process, And so a lot of the investors that are used to doing 506B offerings, they don't want to do a 506C, right? Because there's more paperwork on their side that they have to do that's not required on a 506B, right? And they could be accredited, but it's like, why do I have to waste my time and go through my attorney, through my CPA, send them this, this paperwork just to get them to sign off on it and saying that I'm accredited when I know I'm accredited, and then send it back to this guy, the sponsor, like that he can, check it and sign off on it. And it's just more paperwork for them, right? So that's some of the challenges that you have to deal with when you're doing a 506C, right? Now, looking back, will we do it again? Yeah, we will do it again because we learned so much, right? But it is more challenging, and so I think it really depends on the size of the equity as well. If you're doing a $2 or $3 million raise, I would say do 506B all day long, right? As you get bigger, I think you kind of default to that 506C, right? Because there's only so many sophisticated investors that and that type of thing, right? So I think you kind of default to that, right? But just something to keep in mind, right, for everybody out there that's looking to raise capital, or if you're an investor yourself looking to invest in deals, there's some of the little challenges that come with it, right?
How is that deal performing now in the current environment?
Yeah, so we pretty much walked into COVID-19. So we haven't had the deals under normal circumstances since we took over, right? Under normal non-COVID situations, right? I guess you can say. And so it's going well, given the situation that we have been dealt, right? And so we had to halt and postpone all the renovations, CapEx improvements, those type of things, and we had to change around some of the things that we wanted to do as far as other income sources, those type of things. So everything's like kind of delayed, right? So this goes on for like 6 months or even a year, then it's kind of pushing our pro forma in our business plan, 6 months or a year, right? But given the situation that we're in, we are still doing well. We're still collecting, we're still doing an occupancy. So that's the best that we can ask for given the situation.
So what do you think happens when the stimulus ends? I think it's August when the checks start.
Yeah, that's a very good question. When these things stop, who knows, right? So I think there's a lot of most of the deals out there could be to a certain extent. There's care packages, right? Like they pretty much care packages that have been dropped like throughout the whole nation, right? And so a lot of us as owner operators have taken advantage of that, right? Because our residents have taken advantage of that, and so therefore we've taken advantage of that ultimately as well, right? The challenge comes whenever that unemployment starts to drop off, which is supposed to be, I think, July 31st, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's July 31st, right? So what happens whenever we get to August and September, right? If we don't have another stimulus package, then we might be in some trouble, right? If everything's kind of been inflated with the packages that we've had, then that means that ultimately it hasn't been the residents, it's been the federal government that's been kind of bailing us all out, right? So I think time will tell. Hopefully we're not in a bind won't come Q3 or so, but we have to prepare for that, right? We have to prepare for that and expect that we're not going to be doing as well as we are right now if we don't get another stimulus package coming out. So like I said, I think time will tell. Once we get to August and September, real numbers will show.
Yes, that's what Duke and I are underwriting as well. We're cautiously optimistic, I guess, is we're kind of posturing for that, kind of see what's going to happen.
Right. One thing I would say is that there was that speech, the press, with the Federal Reserve, and then shortly after that, they also announced that given despite the rises in cases, right, that we've been having, we're recording this in June, right, 2020, despite the rise in cases, that we're not going to go through the same situation and shut down the economy again. That's what they're saying, which is a good thing for us, right? It's kind of good and bad, right? You can kind of see it both ways, but from an economic standpoint, it's good because if we were to shut down again, I mean, we'd definitely be crippled, right? As a nation, as an economy, as a world, we'd definitely be crippled, and we'd be in a really, really tough situation, which we're already in. But if we had to shut down again, it would be way worse. So that's something to look forward to, right? There's light at the end of the tunnel, I think, right? And I always see things from an optimistic lens as well.
Exactly. And speaking of the light at the end of the tunnel, we all know there's deals in every cycle. So is your team posturing for possible acquisitions, maybe Q3, Q4, as weaker operators don't have the reserves or the systems and processes to get through this event?
Yeah. I think, we're always, looking at deals. We're always trying to position ourselves to take advantage of an opportunity if the one comes across, right? And be ready, right? That's really the main thing, is to be ready. Will we see deals come around Q3, Q4? Possibly, right? That's still up to, to be determined, I think. But in my opinion, if there are deals out there that become available, in other words, like a fire sale, I think if that does happen, it's going to be short-lived. I think it's going to be just a, once in a lifetime kind of situation where it's just, very short period of time. I don't think it's going to be a bloodbath, but again, who knows, right? We're talking about this in 2020, the last the last economic cycle, like, 08, whenever that happened, that was the beginning of another, market correction, right? But really we didn't get the lowest price points until 2010, 2011, right? Even 2012. So it's like, you're looking at, 2, 3, 4 years, right? After the cycle begin to go downward, right? So we could be in that same situation right now, right? Things are still like, okay, but the effects of it, could start to be really seen, come 2021 or come 2022, right? And so whenever I'm speaking about this, I'm speaking like for the next 6 months to 9 months, right? If we're looking further ahead, then we don't know if it's going to be like 08 and through 2012, right? Because I've heard a lot of guys also say that try not to catch a falling knife, right? Because if you're thinking deals are going to be happening right now, maybe if you would have waited 2 more years, you would have got it for a better price. So that's another thing to keep in mind, right?
Exactly. So how have you, with all that uncertainty, how have you adjusted your investment strategy and your underwriting going forward over the next 2 years or so?
Yeah. So for year one, our total income is we're trying to keep it flat, right? So our rental income has actually had like a little bit of a decline, and as well as our other income, right? So it's more or less flat, but or with a little bit of a negative, right? That's the way we have been underwriting, because there's a lot of other income sources that you're not, if you're in a depression or recession, I guess you could say, there's a lot of things that residents will not want to pay for, such as reserved parking, right? That's considered like a luxury, right? Maybe Wi-Fi, those type of things, right? They're not going to want to pay for those things, but also rental income, right? You're going to have to be more competitive and reduce even your rental rates, right? So I think, overall you have to either keep it flat or even take it a little bit as a negative, but that's the way we're doing it for year one. Once we get to year two, there's a little bit of an increase. Years 3 through 5, because we hold on 5 years, we go to 2%, right? So we're not aggressive when it comes to our underwriting. And so we have like a 2% year over year, like years 3 through 5, right, through exit. And so, yeah, those type of things. I think the reversing cap, you have to, you also have to be conservative there for sure. I think your cap rates have a chance to go up possibly, but as it is right now, they haven't yet. But there's a chance where they could go up slightly. So that's what we're doing. Like I said, we're still looking, but we have to be definitely even be more conservative now than we were even 6 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
What reversion cap are you using, like on the exit?
So we always try to look for the average of what it was during the recession, the last recession, right? So where were we when we were in 2010 through 12, right? So we always try to mimic that reversion cap, for that market, right? So if it was a 7 cap, then we try to keep it close to a 7 cap, right? But at the same time, we look at what our in place, going in cap rate is as well, right? And we always want to be higher than that, right? At the very minimum, 50 basis points. But really, if we can do, 100 basis points or 150 basis points, then that's, anything higher is better, right? But, we try to base it off of, 2010, 2012. I know that was several years ago, but, that was a pretty bad, rough times there. And so if we can underwrite it to that and the deal still makes sense, we feel that we have a deal there. So that's what we try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We just closed a deal in April 15th of 2020. So right in the middle of all of it. And
Congrats.
me and Duke, we had to go in and completely throw out all of our underwriting because we went in contract on it in like February. So before everything happened,
Yep.
we completely rebuilt all of our underwriting, all of our pro forma and everything. And we did 0% rent growth through the first year, no new additional income. I think we did up to a 30% economic vacancy through year one. So yeah, all the same things. And what did we do for our terminal cap rate? Our reversion was like 200 basis points.
Yeah, we had it at
So
200
we went like
points.
crazy, and the deal still worked. So we ended up moving forward on it, but absolutely, we did a lot of the same thing. So what is your favorite trick or tactic when to increase NOI, either by increasing income or decreasing expenses?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think one of the low-hanging fruits is always water conservation for us, right? Especially if they haven't done it, and it's kind of one of those mind-boggling things that where you come across a property is like, why haven't they done this, right? This thing's, you're going through due diligence and you see all these toilets that are leaking, right? You see all these faucets that that are leaking, and it's like, why don't you take care of this? This could add tremendously to your NOI, right? Because you're reducing your expenses. And even if you're an all bills paid property, right? It doesn't matter, right? Like, do it. Like, it doesn't matter if you're especially if you're all bills paid property, right? But it doesn't matter even if you are the residents pay for their own utilities, because ultimately, it goes through you, right? If you can lower your bill, right, your utility bill, and still bill them the same, then what does it matter, right? I think you're able to still save a lot on utilities. So I think water conservation is a big one on the expense side. We always look at that, and then on the income side, apart from the regular rental increases through upgrades, there's always other income, right? And by other income, there's Wi-Fi, which is becoming more and more popular, right? If you don't offer Wi-Fi in your property, then 15, 20 years behind, right? I mean, I think if you're able to offer Wi-Fi in your units, then that's a big amenity. So Wi-Fi, obviously covered parking is a big one. There's so many properties that don't have that, where you gotta, you should add a few spots. Don't add it to every single unit, because then it doesn't become valuable. So add it to a few units, and then obviously reserve parking. That's a big one as well, right? So those are like some of the three largest ones. Washer and dryer connections is another one that's huge. There's so many ways that you can be creative when you're going through renovations. Sure, it's going to cost you a little bit more, and maybe you didn't underwrite for that. But if you put that into your renovations and have it ready, and then even supply the washer and dryer appliances yourself as well, then you can add $50 a unit, sometimes up to $75 per unit. I mean, just do the math, right? The math is crazy, right? Times 100 units times or you divide it by the cap rate. I mean, it's just a crazy number there, right? So those are some of the things that we do for income and for expenses, that just stand out right away, for our properties.
Yeah, those are all great. Especially the washer dryer hookups. That's one that a lot of people don't think about. If the building is older, it's older vintage, it just doesn't have in unit. Most people just don't think of ever adding it if the space is there. So for the Wi-Fi, do you pay for that? Do you offer that as a freebie, or do you do some kind of rub on it?
No, so it's got to be like a rub, right?
Okay.
Because it's another income revenue source. So you want to be able to make some income off of that. So the way that we do it is, there's a bunch of different companies out there that provide it. So you can either pay for the equipment yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be, CapEx there up front. And so you want to get a return off of that. They will still charge you for monitoring it, right? And like for like customer support, technical support, those type of things. But you'll get the majority of the monthly income, right, that you charge to these residents, right? Or you can have it to where they install the equipment, right? And then there's an agreement, right? Usually it's like 5 years, but that's negotiable as well. So they install the equipment, they take all the risk, and then whenever you bill back or whenever you charge the residents, they're keeping 70 to 80% of it, and you're getting 20% of it, right? Which that's a good way as well, because it didn't cost you anything, so the return is actually infinite return, right? There's the piece that you have to sign an agreement. That's the challenge, right? But I think if you can, if you're planning on holding the property for 5 years plus, then you should be fine anyway, right? So there's that way, right? So you can do a combination of both ways. There's even a ramp up to where you're supposed to be paying for the entire property, right? If they bill you for the entire property and then you bill back to your residence, but there's a ramp up, what they call ramp up, where they'll bill you back, but they'll charge you only for a certain percentage of the units. And as the months go on, they'll charge you for more units and then for more units, and it just keeps going on as the months go on, right? And the idea behind that is that not everybody's going to be on board, because there's a bunch of new leases. As you're leasing, you're going to be bringing everybody or the new leases on board with this agreement and having them pay for the service, right? This amenities, right? So, and then like that, it's aligned with your leasing as well, right? And is that coming out of your pocket? So that's another way that you can do it, and which we've done as well, right? But yeah, I think it's an excellent way to increase your revenue sources,
Got it. So switch gears to our fire round. What is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of good books out there. I personally like, if you're like on the business side, I like the classic ones, the cash flow quadrant. I think that's an excellent book, to determine which side of the quadrant we want to be on. I think that's definitely one of my favorite books. But there's a bunch of books out there. Multifamily, I guess. I'll say those real quick. Multifamily Millions and Emerging Real Estate Markets by David Lindow. Those are excellent books if you're learning to the multifamily space. As far as other books that are more like just business in general, I like The Everything Store. That's Jeff Bezos and the way he got started. Elon Musk. There's so many good books. The E-Myth Revisited. I could go on and on and on, but there's a bunch of good books that are really, really solid that I think people should definitely pick up, and read.
I think awesome. The importance of what you mentioned, like the E-Myth and stuff like that, is that when you're getting into multifamily, to me, it's less like buying or acquiring real estate portfolio, but it's more of you're creating a business. And a lot of people don't think like, oh, I'm just buying properties, real estate passive income. Like, no, you're owning a business. An apartment complex is a business. You need to learn how to run a business. And that's why those books like the E-Myth and Traction and stuff like that's important. And I think a lot of people don't make that distinction when thinking about real estate. It's like, oh, I'm just acquiring some rental property. Like, multifamily is absolutely a business. You need to know how to be a business owner.
I agree 100%. And, it's like real quick, it's like going back to, to understanding why people get into the business in the first place, right? Everybody wants to get into real estate. And the majority of the reason why people want to get into real estate is because either A, they want to be financially free, or B, they just want more time, right? Or a combination of both, right? Financially free usually comes with more time. But if you are looking to buy like smaller deals, or you're looking to buy rental houses, then you're not really doing that, right? You're not really, working on your time, because you're actually going to be spending more time, which means that you're not really working and treating it as a business, right? It's more like a hobby, right? So really, when people get into the business, they really need to understand why they're getting into this in the first place. If it's for more time, then maybe single family is not the route like we spoke about earlier. Scale, maybe passively invest, those type of things, right? I think it's very important to people understand what they want to do and go that route,
Yeah, I completely agree. Like that clarity of knowing where you want to go really helps to make the best decision.
Exactly.
So what is your superpower?
Man, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Superpower. I think that I guess I like talking to people. I like building relationships. I used to think that I was afraid of that. I used to think that I was afraid and like an introvert. But the more that I've done this, the more that I've been the longer that I've been in the business, the more I find myself easier to connect with other people. And so I think that's one of my main things is just talking to people, connecting with them, and just building relationships. I think that's probably one of the better things, right? That and focusing on family, right?
I got one for you. After listening to you on a few podcasts, it's I think your superpower is taking action. I heard a couple lines that you threw out that I'm like, man, that could have came from me. Like, that's awesome. And those were creating plans that are like 60, 70%, viable, and then taking action. Don't wait to get, 100% plan, because there's no 100% plans. There's always going to be uncertainty. There's always going to be risk. Like, take action, and let your education, your experiences, the group of people you surround yourself with, like, fill in the gaps of that. So I think that's a huge,
thank you.
Away from you. Yeah.
No, yeah, thank you for saying that one. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. I think, if I can say this real quick, I think if people will just educate themselves enough, right? Like you said, get that 60, 70, 80% of education and understanding, and then move forward, right? Because you're never going to be 100%. That's like never going to be that, right? You're always going to have butterflies, right? Even if you have, like, you find like the Class A deal in downtown Honolulu, and it's always 100% occupied, then what is it? Well, why do you have butterflies? Is it because you're overpaying for the property, maybe? Or is it maybe the timing isn't right? Because you have good collections, you have the good this, you have a good team. There's always going to be something that kind of, you get that butterfly about. And so you're never going to be 100% feel good about it, right? Just move forward anyway, right? You'll figure things out later.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey through multifamily?
Teamwork is definitely very, very important. I think it's what makes or breaks you a lot of times, right? So surround yourself with solid guys. As I said, this is a team effort all the time. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for my team. I would say that 100%, right? And so, you guys look like a solid team. And I think that, individually, you guys wouldn't have been able to get as far as you could as you are now, right? As a team. So I think that's one thing. And another thing I would say is, try to be yourself, right? 100%. People are going to like you for who you are. Don't change who you are, right? I mean, we could talk about politics. I mean, Trump, there's people that love him. There's people that hate him, right? He doesn't worry about people that don't like him. He just, focused on what he does, and that's it, right? I mean, and he's the leader of the United States, of the most powerful country in the world, right? So just focus on yourself 100%. Like, don't worry about anybody else, and be yourself, be genuine 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for the busy working professional who's working towards financial freedom, what advice do you have?
Focus on your goal and don't let it go, right? There's going to be some circumstances, some situations, some barriers. Man, write that down, have it as a vision, and make sure that you never let it go, no matter what it is. When I was going through that situation and I wanted to leave my W-2, I told myself it's going to happen, right? It was just the timing. And even the timing, didn't feel right? I just talked about me being 70 to 80%, there. I still wasn't 100% there, but I still pulled the trigger, right? My finances weren't 100% there. Like, I wasn't replacing my 100% of my income, but I still pulled the trigger, right? And so, that's one thing I would say, have your goal, have your plan, be different, right? And usually that being different is not the most popular thing, especially in the working environment, right? People are going to see you differently. They're not going to like, they're going to tend to not like what you're doing, but you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for them. So make sure you follow what your heart says to do,
Exactly. And one of the things I tell people, because I have conversations like this all the time of like, I can't leave my job. I can't leave this. And for me, it's like, if you're struggling to take action, then your why is not big enough. Like your why, like you said, your children, your kids, creating that legacy of wealth for them, being an example, a role model. Like, if that why isn't strong enough, then that's why you have those hesitations to take action. If your why is strong enough, then it's not even an option. Like, you don't have the option not to take action. Like, I have to be a role model for my kids. I have to do this for them. It's inaction is not an option. I have to do it. I have to jump off the ship, burn the ship behind me, or whatever it is. It's so for people that have that struggle of not wanting to move forward, they just need to do some more self-reflection and find a why that's so deep, so strong that it's, anything else is not an option.
I agree 100%. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. I think burning that ship, that's one of the real tests, right? That's, same thing as quitting your job, right? And for me, I worked on cars, right? Like, I worked on cars, BMW, towards the latter stages of my career. I was, overseeing and doing a lot more. It was a lot more, well, I guess you could say administrative, but it was still technical. But one of the first things I did was I got rid of a lot of my stuff, my tools, toolbox. I'm not going back to that, And so there's no reason to be ashamed of your past, right? That, like I enjoyed what I did that, right? You know, I told myself I'm not going back. This is what it is. Selling this off and moving forward, right? And that was sort of my burning the ship situation, right? As a matter of fact, I haven't even been back to that location, right? To that place of work, just because there's really hasn't been any need for me to go back, right? Look forward, don't look back. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, whatever. You could have made different changes, but that goes with everything, right? In life, right? So just keep looking forward, and that's the way I would say, yeah.
Well, we really appreciate your time and wisdom. So as we wrap this up, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really do appreciate it. So if people wanted to reach out to me, they can go to my website, GenWealthCapital.com, or they could, send me an email. That's Juan@GenWealthCapital.com, Juan@GenWealthCapital.com, or, reach out to me on social media as well. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm on Twitter as well. So at the Juan Vargas. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, guys. It was fun, and I appreciate it.
Hey, Duke, I told you that Juan would not disappoint. The tax assessor driving for dollars, going to the tax assessor website and finding where these properties are, getting some off-market deals, throwing the direct mailers in and landing his first 32 unit. That is a awesome way to land your first multifamily deal, and shows that the hustle really does pay off. I loved his tips on the income generators, going in through the Wi-Fi and doing a rubs on Wi-Fi. So if you're not offering Wi-Fi, you're a decade behind, the curve. That's awesome. And it's awesome to hear that one of my favorite things of doing the water conservation, the first thing that you do into a property is also one of the first things he does as well. So it gives a lot of confidence in me and our business plan. It shows that, great minds think alike, and we're all looking for the same opportunities when we go into a deal. So he also has some great book recommendations too that I took note of, like the Everything Store, the Jeff Bezos book, and just a reminder of multifamily is not the same in my eyes as other real estate acquisition strategies. You're not just buying some single family houses, some duplexes, and putting them in a portfolio for as a side hobby. Multifamily apartment investing is a business. You need to know how to be a business owner, how to set up systems and processes and run teams. And that's where the books like the Cash Flow Cogent, the E-Myth, Traction, stuff like that come into play, because you need to be a competent business owner in this industry.
And if you found value in this podcast, please subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. We would love it if you give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share the episode with them. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and more. If you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. See you next time.